Okay, yeah, I'm here with Dr. Carmaletta Williams, Executive Director of the Black Archives of Mid-America in Kansas City, also known as Dr. Karma. That's a great name. I like that. So we have a few questions here from students, and let's just get right to it.
Okay.
So your talk about Langston Hughes, was there ever a time when Langston Hughes was not proud of his blackness?
Never. Not ever. Sometimes it may have looked as if he was running away from black and blackness, but he never did. And in fact, he even said to a New York Times reporter that when he died, if it said Negro artist dies, he would be perfectly happy. And he said, because if anybody identifies themselves as a Negro artist, it is I. I do that. But he, as they used to say about Zora Neale Hurston, he moved easily in a multicultural world. And so we see that there are long periods of times when he's in Mexico, and he's in Mexico with a father who very much is ashamed of being black. And he's telling Hughes, you know, and it's a quote, "I don't want you to live like a nigger among niggers. I want you to get out of there." And he's trying to get him to go to Europe for a classical college education or to move to Mexico. But those aren't Langston's feelings, those are his father's feelings. And he goes to Harlem. He makes a compromise with his father that he'll go to Columbia University and study engineering because his father wants him to have a profession where he'll be able to make money. But also Langston knows that if he goes to Columbia University, he'll be in New York. And New York is where Harlem is. And that's where he wants to be. So he goes to the university for a year. He makes good grades, but he just can't stomach the idea of being an engineer and not a writer. So he drops out of school, grabs a freighter. It's a ship going nowhere. It literally just went up and down the Hudson River. And then finally he gets across the ocean, the Atlantic, and gets in Africa. But he was always very much, and he says that he needed black people.
Yeah.
So he not only identified, he had this deep need to be immersed in blackness.
All right, good. Many people, many people have not heard of Langston Hughes. That's what the question says. How do you think his legacy should be taught?
Well, I think anybody who hasn't heard of Langston Hughes is not paying attention, especially in all of these political climates. Every candidate is quoting Langston Hughes. And even my least favorite president is saying, you know, let America be America again. That's from Hughes. But what he doesn't say is the last line of that poem is, but America was never America to me. All the way from the last 4 elections that I can remember, all of the presidential candidates have hooked on to something of Hughes. Now, the other thing to remember is if you don't know him, get to know him. He's easy to read, he's understandable, and he writes in so many genres. He's a poet, he's a novelist, he's a biographer, he's a librettist if you're into music. He does translations if English is not your first language. So he's truly accessible to a wide range of people.
Yeah.
And you can, yes.
I'm thinking about your book and thinking about, so I formerly in a past life was a high school English teacher. In the 9th grade anthology, we would usually read Theme for English B, and then have an opportunity to write about that. And I think in the anthology we get one little snapshot of what Langston Hughes was. And in your book, is it your intention to tell the story? I think in your talk you talked about the true story of Langston Hughes. What does that mean?
Well, I have a couple of Langston Hughes books, and the one for high school English teachers was through the National Council of Teachers of English, and it's Do Nothing Till You Hear From Me, Langston Hughes in the Classroom. And I took that name because that's what his favorite song was. And the tagline to Do Nothing Till You Hear From Me is, and you never will. So in my latest book, My Dear Boy, I argue that we did hear from him. Langston was very clear about what he was about, what his life was about, what his joys and missions and sorrows were. So we have heard about him. Um, and in Montage of a Dream, I have a chapter in there, Mother to Son. And when we look at Hughes, he's very open. Uh, Even though some people have said, I have traveled all over the world with him, I've spent months with him, and he is the least self-revealing person I've ever met. Um, but he does tell us, we just have to look for it. And it's all in his art.
So as an artist, your talk, Born on a Troubled Road, he definitely had some struggles, some things to get over. Is that an important part of artistry? Do most artists need to define their struggle and feel that what that is? What do you think about that?
I don't know if most need it or not, but most that we cherish have had to go through those struggles. And when we look at their lives, we're going like, wow. But it's that internal search for what is it that's happening to you and recognizing it and be honest about it. Langston Hughes was a man who spent every day of his life, and I mean every day from the day he was born, trying to get his mother's unconditional love until the day she died. And she used emotional blackmail to try to tie him to her. And she would write him, in my dear boy, you'll read the letters, and she'll say, the reason we aren't closer. Or if you would send me this coat, it would show me how much you love me. If you really love me, you would send me money. So she had that tied to him in that he wanted her love and she wanted something from him, mostly financial assistance. And he never got it. He never got that love. So he writes about it and he makes that journey through his art to try to make some kind of reconciliation of what his family should be. He really ends up deciding that his biological family ain't cutting it. He's not getting there with them. Carrie is never going to love him for who he is. His stepbrother just wants to use him. His grandmother dies, so she's not there. And so he makes this functional family. And he actually creates a family with Toy Harper, who was his mother's friend from Garnett, Kansas. They're in New York and they buy a house together. They buy a brownstone together in Harlem. And Toy is married to Emerson and they become a family. They have holidays there at the brownstone and parties. And that's a family. And she loves him unconditionally. They make art together. They make music together. You know, he's a librettist. He writes lyrics and she sings and she plays music. So he finds family that way. Arna Bontemps, who is his lookalike, becomes his brother. And people often mistake them for each other. But Arna has a wife and a whole slug of kids, like 6 of them. And they all adore Langston. They call him Uncle Langston. And so that becomes family to him. But he searches it out. I mean, he writes that that children shouldn't have to have parents. And he's very honest about his relationship with his mother and father, you know, and he said his father hated being Black. And by extension, he knew that that meant he hated him because if anybody saw himself as Black, it was Langston. And he said his father used to work to make money and save money, and his mother wanted money to spend money. But neither one of them saw a place for him, a real place as child in their relationships. When his father died, he left him nothing, not one penny. And when his mother died, he had to borrow money to bury her. But from, as they say, it's not the year you were born and the year you died, it's that dash in between. Well, that dash in between was very troubled for him. And he kept trying to overcome it. Just never could.
You cited his poem, Kids Who Die, which I looked up and I reread it, and I was struck by the thought that it was written in 1938. this is a poem that in 2015 went viral, bringing it back to talk about, you know,
Michael Brown,
Mike
Trayvon
Brown, all these
Martin.
Trayvon Martin, all these things that are
Yeah.
happening. And today, just today, we've had people protesting the death of Breonna Taylor for 119 days. And the Attorney General in Kentucky made a ruling today, gave an indictment to one of the 3 police officers, and didn't even, the indictment wasn't even regarding the death of Breonna Taylor.
No,
Take
it's just
for that.
safety.
So my question is, you know, here's Langston Hughes, 1938. He writes Kids Who Die. And Threshers, if you haven't read Kids Who Die, go look that up on the internet.
Look it up.
Look it up and read that. That is
Look it up.
powerful.
Yesterday here in Kansas City, a 22-month-old baby died. Victim, he was shot 17 times. Well, somebody shot into the car where he was 17 times. And the baby wasn't even 2 yet, a 1-year-old child. And he was murdered. We have Legend Teleferro, who is for this national task force is invading all of these cities. He's laying on the floor in a pillow and a blanket, making a tent. Somebody shoots into his apartment and kills him. It's got to stop. Just like 1938 and 2020, this same nonsense is still happening and kids are still dying. You know, I thought about the firefighter with Tyrone is the little baby's name. And the family drove to the fire station and they actually handed the baby to the firefighter to try to get him to save him. And he said that when it's grown folks who get murdered because they were able to make a decision and they made bad decisions, then you tend to think about that murder in different terms than when it's an innocent baby. And I think that's what Hughes saw and what he's saying to us. These kids are dying because people aren't looking at them. They aren't looking at their lives. They aren't thinking of ways that they can save these babies. And it's mostly based on money, drug deals gone bad, or somebody's just out of their heads and starts shooting up a crowd, or those kinds of things. And who's suffering are the babies, or the little kids. And that's unconscionable. We can't let that happen. We can't let that keep happening. And the problem is, I don't know what to suggest to stop it. I don't know how that stops. What do we do? We can take to the streets and we can march and we can carry signs. And we can work with police departments to stop those kinds of murders. But these street murders where the babies are getting killed, I don't know what we can do to stop it, but it's got to stop. Yes. We can't let the kids who die. Wow.
I went to the Black Archives of Mid-America in Kansas City website and watched a couple of the little videos there, and at least 2 people said, we need to learn from the past. We need to know our past so we can act today to do things. And I think that's really important. Let's close up here with just kind of giving us an overview of what the mission of the Black Archives of Mid-America in Kansas City is. What would we see if we went there?
Well, we collect, preserve, and share. All of those artifacts, documents that chronicle and demonstrate the building of Black life and culture in our America. It says Mid-America, and it's in Kansas City, but we actually have artifacts from all over. In fact, a man came in a couple of months ago and gave us his mother's African artifacts, and they're genuine and they're beautiful, and we have to acknowledge, those are the roots. But we also have to acknowledge that Black America's story is America's story, and we can't separate those things. We have to look at them. This is not just, it's a big, beautiful building. It is, it's just gorgeous, and it's big. So if you come, we can socially distance you. But you have to wear a mask. We do have masks. But it is that story in our main Ewing Marion Kaufman exhibition hall. We have the building of Black Kansas City. We have those people who went into creating this place and this space, from Junius Groves, who came to Leavenworth with 60, 80 cents in his pocket and grew to be a millionaire. At the turn of the century, he had running water, hot and cold water pipes and electricity and those kinds of things, to Catherine B. Richardson, who was a little bitty white woman, and she and her sister were on the board at Children's Mercy Hospital. And one day in a board meeting, she stood up and said, "I'm sick and tired of us treating kids from around the world, and we don't treat the Negro kids who live right here. So until we do, I'm not giving you another dime." They integrated Children's Mercy Hospital that day. So everybody then has a place and a space in making this community what it is, making this country what it is. And that's what we kind of do here at the Black Archives, is to show as many aspects of culture as we can, of history, of art, so that everybody knows it belongs to us, it belongs to all of us. And then part of it, as far as our main purpose, is to make sure that Black folks understand that they had a critical mission in building this country. And if you think that the role of Black folks was relegated to slavery, then you're wrong. So we want to show that, and people weren't slaves, they were enslaved. And so we talk about that. Right now we're building, we have partnered with the Equal Justice Initiative. They built a new lynching museum in Montgomery, Alabama. We're the Missouri site, because these people who were victimized by racial violence need to be recognized. We know who they are. We know their stories. They weren't just a lone man, and we hear these stories, drug out by 3 people and hung in the woods. I went down to Springfield, Missouri, Saturday, and got the jars of 3 men who were lynched in Springfield. 3,000 people stood around and watched those men die. And not one person said, "This is wrong. This is not the thing to do. Stop it." 3,000 people watched and laughed and talked and had a great time. So we've got to change those mindsets.
Yeah.
For one thing, if you're the child and your parents are there, was one of those 3,000 people, and your neighbors are there and everybody's having fun and laughing while 3 men died, hung from the tower, then you don't know that that's wrong. So you have to be educated. You have to learn, and you have to think it through and recognize that these things are wrong. We have a group here at the Archives called BACON, Black Archives Youth Coalition Network. And they had a wonderful session, because they came to me and said, like, "What can we do?" I said, "I want you to tell me. I want you to think it through. When we go to all these marches, what do you see?" And they said, "We see a whole lot of white folks there." Like, why are they there? Because they've come to recognize that something has to change. So to me, that's so positive. It's such a wonderful movement that people aren't just sitting at home and going, "Oh, that's too bad." You know, that now they're hitting the streets and they're saying, "We know it was wrong. It shouldn't have happened. It did happen. We can't do anything about that, but we can march on from now." So, you know, my faith and my hope is that these young folks will continue to prevail. And they're like, "Who's our leader?" I'm like, "It's in your generation. It's not in my generation. We've done our thing. We got Obama, you know?" So the rest is left up to these young high school and college folks.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
they do it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm going to stop the recording right there.
Okay.